Hi, my name's James Keach, and I'm the director-producer of Linda and the Mockingbirds.
In the 80s with the Canciones de mi Padre, in the Mexican community, Linda's music was an enormous source of pride for people.
Brought me a lot of hope.
Because I was light-skinned and with a German surname, people didn't suspect that I was Mexican, and they'd make some kind of anti-Mexican remark. They go, well, these greasers coming in here, you know, and I'd always get pretty hot about it.
Linda invited our group, Los Ensomples, to join her going to Mexico.
We're gonna play music. This is music that comes from years ago, and we're bringing it back alive, and it's still alive.
The kids growing up in the United States, they're Americans. It's important that they know that we're all immigrants, every one of us that isn't native.
I could see the value of a trip to go down for musical purposes, for a musical exchange.
How'd you get Jackson to come?
We asked him.
Look, if Linda Ronstadt invites you to go to Mexico, I don't need to know any more than that. Let's go.
I remember one time I was smaller than my sister, and they were gone, or my dad was gone. He had been detained. And that was very scary.
Oswaldo, what do you want for the country in your future?
I want to see white people and Mexicans together. I want to see them talking to each other.
That is the trailer for the documentary Linda and the Mockingbirds, and this is Factual America. Factual America is produced by Alamo Pictures, a production company specializing in documentaries, television, and shorts about the USA for an international audience. I'm your host, Matthew Sherwood, and every week we look at America through the lens of documentary filmmaking by interviewing filmmakers and experts on the American experience. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Alamo Pictures to be the first to hear about new productions, to find out where you can see our films, and to connect with our team. Linda Ronstadt's singing career spanned 5 decades. A versatile and talented artist, she has won 10 Grammys, 3 American Music Awards, 2 Academy of Country Music Awards, and an Emmy. Along the way, she recorded the biggest-selling foreign-language album of all time. Now retired from singing, Linda continues to give back to the community, as captured by director and producer James Keach in Linda and the Mockingbirds. James joins us to share a side of Linda Ronstadt that few have seen, and in the process, his film captures the essence of Mexican American culture and the immigrant experience. We caught up with James from his office in Culver City, California. James Keach, welcome to Factual America. James, how are things there with you in, what is it, Culver City, California?
Yeah, things are good. I mean, well, things are coronavirus good, you know. So.
Yeah, it's all relative these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, yeah.
Okay. Well, James, thanks again for coming on to the Factual America podcast. The film, we've just heard a trailer for Linda and the Mockingbirds, which some are calling a follow-up to your doc that you produced, Linda Ronstadt, The Sound of My Voice, though I think it's more than just a follow-up, I would say. I've seen Shout Studios has acquired it. When and where will it be released?
Well, Shout Studio is going to release it all over all on digital platforms.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do we know yet, or is it just going to be, I think is it on October 20th?
October 20th. It'll be on Apple and Amazon, you know, all the regular suspects. It'll be wide.
Okay. That's great news, because this is definitely a film that I would highly recommend. I wanted to personally thank you so much for making this film. As a South Texan born and bred, I think this is an excellent film. I know it's more focused on sort of California, Arizona, but it did bring back a lot of memories for me. So thank you so much.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from San Antonio.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So and I'm probably about the same age. I'm gathering about one of your characters on there, Eugene Rodriguez, is it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's a very well. I'll just cut to the chase. I think you capture Mexican American culture quite well in this film, but maybe we can talk a little bit more about that later. For those who haven't seen the film yet, because I think this podcast is going to get released just about the time you go viral, hopefully. Maybe give us a little synopsis of the film.
Well, the film actually is about Linda Ronstadt, when we were doing Sound of My Voice, said, when asking, would you do an interview for the film? We need to do an interview in San Francisco. And she said, James, I'd rather not do an interview in San Francisco. I'd rather do an interview in Mexico. I said, in Mexico? She said, yes, I'm going with Eugene Rodriguez and Los Sensoles, a group that I've been supporting for years, to Banamachi, where my grandfather came from. And we're taking 30 of his students who are musicians and dancers, and doing an exchange with a folklorica group in Banamachi. And they would like somebody to film them. And that's where I'll do the interview for you. I won't do it in San Francisco. I'll do it in Banamachi. And I said, okay. And so I thought I was going down there just to film the kids dancing and do an interview with Linda. And it was about this time that the president and immigration was sounding off about murders and rapists and all the stuff at the border. And I started hearing from Eugene Rodriguez the stories of some of the teachers that were working with his group, and that they had come across the border as children illegally, and now they were legal citizens. And I thought, wow, this would make a very I'd like to interview them too. And it just started with the first day we shot was on the border, and it grew into a film. I had no idea that this movie was going to happen. And it just, I was so upset with what I was hearing in the news about the marginalization that was occurring to these people, that I got very involved with their personal stories. And the end result of it is a musical film about Mexican culture and the exchange program. And also, more importantly, it focuses on Linda Ronstadt and the fact that she was a Mexican woman, but most people did not know that, and some of the treatment that she had as a young woman, and her being marginalized. And so anyway,
and the rest is history. I mean, I think that's very interesting. Maybe one of the first docs we've discussed that was so organic, if you will, that it didn't start off even as a project, really. It just kind of, it sort of happened. I mean, I'm about to ask you a question because we've got an international audience, and for you and me, it's probably sounds like, I can't imagine I would be asking you this question, but maybe it's worth setting the stage for maybe some of our younger listeners to say, who is Linda Ronstadt?
Well, Linda Ronstadt in the 70s, 80s, 90s in America was one of the biggest musical stars and worldwide stars. And she was known for being a pop singer and singing great songs and songs that everybody would recognize. Few people knew that she was actually Mexican. And she, towards the end of her, after she'd become a superstar, she decided that she was going to do songs that her father and family had sung when she was a child, and it was called Los Canciones de Mi Padre. And it still to this day is the biggest selling non-English record in the history of the record business. And so Linda is a superstar here, and it to both Caucasian people and everybody knows her in that community, but she crossed over into the Mexican community, and I don't think a lot of them knew that she was a superstar in pop music. And so this was an opportunity to combine the two musical styles and to reflect on her heritage,
And she does that, and you capture that very well in the film. I like the archival footage you found. Was that from the Today Show with Jane Pauley? Yeah,
Yeah.
the way the interview goes at first, it's a little bit uncomfortable, and it kind of reminds me. It's kind of it takes a bit of a tone at the beginning that's not that dissimilar, actually, to things I remember from that time period. Even well-meaning people not really understanding what it means to be Mexican or Mexican American.
Right.
I mean, would you?
There was a little bit of edge there.
Yeah,
And Linda looked at her and she said, well,
this isn't
you're,
Spain.
huh? She said,
this isn't Spain or something like that.
You know, and she said, so you're half Mexican. And she says,
Oh, yeah.
no, actually, I'm Mexican.
Yeah.
You know, she didn't mean to be dismissive, but it came off that way.
It does. I think, yeah, she goes back. She says, how far back do you have to go until you find Spanish in your family or something like that?
Right.
You know, it's
exactly.
like, you know, and you're like, oh, come on. I mean, you know,
Right.
and it's, I won't name names. I've got family members who still refer to people who are Mexican American as Spanish, you know, or something like that. But I mean, so you've told us how this came about, which is very interesting. So you've also mentioned, I'm going to stumble over this name during the entire podcast, but Los Sensontles.
Los Sensontles.
Sensontles.
Which means in Spanish, it means the Mockingbirds.
Yes.
So that's where Linda and the Mockingbirds comes from. It would be kind of a tongue twister to say Linda and Los Sensontles.
Yes.
So it's Linda and the Mockingbirds, and then, you know, parenthetically, it's Los Sensontles.
So they, so what? I mean, that's on its own is an amazing story. What's happening there?
Well, it is an amazing story about a guy who came from Glendale and Eugene Rodriguez, and started playing music when he was a young man, and then decided to dedicate his life to teaching music and cultural Mexican culture to kids in Northern California. And I think he's had around 5,000 kids go through his program. And it's pretty amazing. And Linda saw him many years ago in San Francisco on the streets, and they were just dancing and you know, and I can't remember exactly the square that they were dancing in. He didn't know who she was, and she said, yeah, and she said, oh, that's really good, and he said, thank you, and he said, and she said, if you need any help, let me know. My name's Linda. and he didn't know who she was, and later he found out, oh my, that was Linda Ronstadt, and so they became very good friends and have been so for many years.
And so she's a benefactor of his project. Is that basically it?
Yeah, she is a benefactor, but she's one of many. I think that he has a lot of support. But Linda has always felt that music and dance are very, very important, you know, and yeah.
Well, and it's beautiful, and I think you capture beautifully the. I know there's some ballet folklorico, there's some traditional Mexican music, and it's just these. I mean, I think the dresses and everything are just make for amazing cinematography, really.
Yeah.
So you take a road trip to Sonora, Mexico, basically, and Jackson Browne tags along.
Yep.
And a bunch of Mexican American kids who sing and dance. Is that is, you know, what was that like?
It was fantastic. I mean, Jackson Browne, when back in the day, I learned all his songs myself. So to actually be on the journey with him, and at night we would sit around the dinner table and he'd play all the songs that I loved, and it was a musical. It's kind of like, I mean, my family and I always used to play music, and at night, you know, we didn't have video games in those days, so it was music, and it was the same spirit. Joe and Pete Ronstadt were on the trip, and Eugene and all the musicians, and so music was there all the time, and so it was very special. And Jackson is a very dear friend of Linda's, and as he said in the film, I said, how'd you go on the trip? And he said, well, Linda Ronstadt asked you to go to Mexico, you go, you know. So they used to tour together, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
I think she mentions that at one point, either one of them would always be hungover or something the next day or something to that effect.
I doubt it was Linda.
I don't think it was Linda.
I don't think it was Linda. Yeah.
And so you had this amazing journey, and like any journey, there's you interweave many stories, and the more you unpeel the onion, the more you find some interesting things about the different, particularly the people that are part of this group. So Eugene, who's got, as you've mentioned, this guy from Glendale who started this. You've got Lucina Rodriguez, who I mean, that was a very compelling story. And did you know that you were going to get that story before you went on the trip?
I knew that. I mean, Eugene had told me. She said, you know, you might want to talk to some of these guys.
Yeah.
That he told me her story, that she'd come when she was a child, and he told me Fabiola's story, and you know, they were very reluctant to talk about it because I guess it creates some emotional memories that were kind of unpleasant. But at any rate, he told me the story, and I said, and I talked to her, and I said, it was actually the first day of shooting that we went down to the border.
Yeah.
And it was at that time the news was really, really strident, and maligning of Mexicans. And so that was the first day of shooting. And when you see that wall, that picture tells 1,000 words, you know.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know her story, and that's part of, but making documentaries, of course, is that, you know, it's, as you said, peeling the onion.
Yeah.
You know, it's like sculpting. You start with a stone and you just keep peeling it away, and it reveals itself. And that's kind of what the journey was. It started with her, and it just continued with interviewing for the families in Eugene, and discovering the humanity of these people, and in a way that completely offset the kind of stuff that we were hearing in the news.
Yeah.
And the kind of images that were being portrayed. Yeah. And I think hopefully people, when they see it, will be touched by the fact that these people are us. There is no difference here. And the fact that somebody is preaching that they're different, that they're this or they're that, and they're marginalizing people, and people in Europe, of course, you guys have immigration issues over there too. And I'm sure there are issues with certain individuals.
Yeah.
But that's true in any group.
Yeah.
But you don't want to marginalize groups just because they're different. They're different races or religions or anything else. It's just.
Yeah. No, I think you. I mean, it's interesting. We'll maybe after the break I'll go a little more into that, because this, in terms of how you approached it. But I think it is. I mean, I don't think you're calling for uncontrolled immigration or anything like that. It's just for people to be treated humanely and stop being vilified.
Exactly. I mean, you know, we need to have structure.
Yeah. We
need to know who, when, and where people are coming into the country, and we need to treat them humanely. Our country is built. Everybody's an immigrant, really, in the United States. You know, and we all bleed the same way, put our pants on the same way, you know, and the fact that we have that racism is being perpetuated by is very unfortunate. And I don't think the world in the future is going to be able to tolerate it too well, because it's going to cause a lot of problems.
It causes. Yeah, I mean, as someone who's got, I think you have children as well, but as someone who's got children, I'm noticing that I don't think they're going to tolerate it either.
No.
You know, the future generations just don't understand this.
Well, it's because, well, fortunately, you and me are teaching them that that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not accepted. We don't behave that way. It's not like do as I say. We do that we behave that way. We don't, you know, we don't allow that. And, you know, so. Yeah.
I just wanted to, I mean, I just a thought occurred to me. You were talking, we were talking about these stories. And then as part of this, you going back to Jackson Browne, you have this song, is that Dreamer?
Yeah.
Is that an original song that's, I mean, he says he does play it at concerts, but I hadn't heard it before. Is that, it's an interesting, it's a beautiful song.
He wrote the song with Eugene about Lucina and her journey. The song is about the girl that we interview at the board, one of the teachers who came across as a child to be with her father, who was in the United States, with her mother and her brother. And it's her song. It's about her and her journey. So,
well, you know what, I'm and we can always edit this out. I'm going to hope that maybe we can after we get off this podcast, I'll be back in touch with the people at Shout, and maybe we can listen to a little clip of that. I think that would be very nice. But in terms of, you know, these, okay, so people watch the film. I'm not going to tell you what Lucina says about her experience. And it's a very compelling. One thing I was going to ask you, and I'll cut to it now, is you go straight. I mean, you go straight to the children and ask them questions, which I found very very interesting. Was that intentional? I mean, you have these different families that, and obviously their children are in as part of the group and are on this trip, and then you ask them how they feel.
Yes, I do ask the children how they feel because, you know, again, we don't want to marginalize another group called kids.
Yeah.
You know, kids, you know, kids they're generally very honest, and they say what they feel if they trust you. And I've always taught my kids, I said, what's going on, man? And they'll answer it. And the kids in this case, when they felt that the safety of their parents, when they were there, surrounded by their parents, and their parents were talking, and they felt it was safe, and they could say what they really felt, and it was very, very powerful what they said.
I agree. I mean, very mature. I think it was well done later. I think one of the parents said, look, we have to have these conversations with our children, even if they're only 5 years old. It's just the reality of the situation. So they seem to be, well, extremely mature.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of like the thing that in this country, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on right now. When a lot of the African Americans are interviewed, even guys that are sports stars or music, when they're away from the stage and they're driving down the street, they have been taught by their parents that they better you know, keep their hands up, and they better be very polite because bad things can happen to them. And so in this case, the kids were taught by their parents that these things could happen. And the boy is talking about how his father was taken away from him, and when he was a little boy, and it scared him to death, you know. And that's what the mother was referring to, that we need to have these conversations so that they understand what can happen here, you know. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's a frightening thing to have the ICE agents, you know, you never know. And they can pick up the wrong people. They've done it many times. And again, I'm not for open borders, and I'm not trying to diminish the presence of people doing their jobs, but it's a pretty scary thing that, you know, I mean, white people don't have that problem. They just don't. You know, I'm not worried that somebody's going to come in my house and say, "Hey, man, you got to go home." Well, I am home, and you know, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that's it's a bit early, but let's go to a break, and if we're lucky, maybe we'll also our listeners will be able to hear a little bit of some of the music, some of this amazing music that's in this film, Linda and the Mockingbirds. So let's take a break now. You're listening to Factual America. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Alamo Pictures to keep up to date with new releases or upcoming shows. Check out the show notes to learn more about the program, our guests, and the team behind the production. Now back to Factual America.
Maybe it's genetic memory, but I feel very at home when I go to Mexico. I hope it makes the kids feel like they have more of an understanding of who they are, why they're important, why they should never be rendered invisible or without their dignity.
This is where a lot of deportees walk along this wall here.
I was born and raised in Mexico. My dad was in the United States, so he wanted the rest of the family to join him. We had to cross the border illegally.
Traveled north to support her so many years before. At the end of my show, I do a song called I'm a Patriot. When I say, and I ain't no white supremacist, and the place just roars. Because who would be a white supremacist in this country? This country's not white. It was not founded to be white. I don't nacidos de la fe y la ilusión.
Welcome back to Factual America. I'm with James Keach, director and producer of Linda and the Mockingbirds. Los Senzones both honors and upends traditional Mexican music, tapping deep roots as it flowers into something completely new and distinctly American. That is from the New York Times. James, had you had much interaction with Mexican or Mexican American culture before you did this film?
Yes, I mean, I grew up in my first 10 years of my life in South Texas.
Did you?
So,
where were you in South Texas?
well, do you know where Taft, Texas is?
Taft?
No. Do you know where Sinton, Texas is?
Sinton?
Sinton. Okay.
Yeah,
Do you know where Corpus is?
I know where Corpus, and I know
Okay.
you're getting close to the King. You're getting towards like the King Ranch, sort of down that direction.
Right. Well, Taft was a town of about 2,500 people in between Sinton and Corpus.
Yeah.
So, and my grandmother lived there, and I was there. My dad was doing a television show called Tales of the Texas Rangers. And so for all that time, so I was there with my grandmother, and Salome and his family were some of her best friends. And we used to have Mexican food all the time, and he was there all the time. And we were very close. So yes, but at the same time, Salome lived on one side of town,
Yeah.
and black people lived on another side of town, and
Yeah.
the white people lived in the middle. And it was always something that really bothered me.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand why we all weren't together.
Mm.
But I was very close to children and his family, and played sports together, and but it was segregated, unfortunately, and it's always bothered me. I would say, if these folks can make dinner, why can't they sit down at the dinner table with us?
Yeah.
And then it just wasn't done at that time back in those days.
And as a fellow South Texan, I can add, I may be the generation, I don't know, we're not separated by that many years, but I may be the next generation. And yes, maybe it wasn't things weren't officially segregated, but you still had north side of San Antonio was white, east side was where the black community was, and west and south side were the Hispanic community. And it was, I'm not proud of things that I've heard, and while people, I think, were starting to celebrate the culture more, even then, I mean, I'm aware of things that were shouted out of school bus windows to construction sites and things like that I just recoil in horror at. So it's kind of been one of these. It's probably another podcast, Texas and South Texas's relationship with its Mexican roots. But one thing
I think that's true. It wasn't so long ago that the Civil War took place.
Yeah.
It seemed, you're in Europe. You go to Europe and you look around, 200 years is nothing.
Yeah.
So the domestication that occurred in families, and societal domestication was, it wasn't good. And hopefully in our lifetime, in our children's lifetime, equality will happen. But like I said, it always bothered me it's bothered me my whole life. And I've tried very hard to make movies that celebrate the humanity of everybody.
Yeah.
And, I just,
yeah, I think very much. I think that's what your film does. I think that's the best way of putting it. It's if nothing else, it's a celebration of humanity. I think one thing we were already talking about. It's almost kind of the elephant in the room. But I mean, you've talked about ICE agents and things. But there's a backdrop that's interesting, because when I saw the press around this and the trailer, you couldn't blame maybe someone for thinking this might be a bit of a hard-hitting polemic, but it's anything but. There's this backdrop that, okay, you go through by the wall and everything, but it's not like you are regaling us with loads of statistics about family detentions and zero tolerance policies. Was that intentional on your part?
yes, it was. It was very intentional. I don't want to give that any more power. I don't want to create more conversation around the disastrous immigration policies that have been employed, and the behavior. Like I said, I'm for immigration, laws, but I don't want to give that ugliness any more juice. I don't want to reinforce it, nor do I want to give them any more screen time. They've had enough. It's enough of that.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that's a very good point. I think it's made in the movie when we already referred to that song "Dreamer," where Jackson Browne had some lyrics in his head that had been rolling around for 30 years or something, and Eugene kind of helped him flip it around. Instead of talking about what we've, these individuals, why not focus on someone like Lucina, which is what I think makes that such a compelling song. I mean, I guess for our listeners, just so we can set the stage a little bit. I mean, what we are talking about is obviously a policy was implemented around 2016-17 that resulted in those being detained at the border, and then families. It wasn't just by accident. It was a concerted policy that families would be separated, and children were removed from their parents, never to possibly see them again, in some horrible conditions. I mean, this has been a crazy year. We don't really hear too much about it anymore. Are you aware of is it still going on?
Yes, it's definitely still going on. In fact, it's very intense right now, but because of the political climate in our country, it's not getting the press. The coronavirus is getting the press. I mean, it's kind of like, every day there's something new, there's something crazier, going on, and that gets the press, and the other thing is kind of pushed aside, and that's unfortunate, but that's the reality of our of our world right now.
Yeah. So if we can, so what is this film really all about in your mind?
It's a celebration of life. Celebration of everybody, of the commonality of our journeys on this earth, and that we must, you look at people the way we look at our children, we look at other people, and we're not different. We might look different, but we're really not. And it's about values. It's a movie about values, and hopefully it's uplifting, as you said. We have enough darkness every day in the news, and the music tells the dark stories, which is an interesting way to do it. The songs speak of the darkness, and yet the songs are still celebratory because, again, as Shakespeare said, music is the fruit of love. So that's what we tried to do.
I mean, I think if I would add to that, I think it captures well the immigrant experience, what it means to be American. I mean, one thing I was going to ask you is, what struck you most when you were interviewing and filming these people? You ask them, you ask him a lot of questions about values, which I thought was interesting. In my pidgin Spanish, I could understand what they were saying before it got translated, but it was very, it was amazing how often they said the same 2 or 3 words.
Respect was the one they said
Yep.
over and over. We respect each other and other people, and we work hard.
Work hard.
We work hard, and
family.
Yeah, and family. Yep.
I mean,
those are the three things.
Just,
and those are all the things. Those are the values that we all should have.
Yeah.
And many of us do have, I think.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think. Well, again, and I just to say thank you so much for making the film. I think it's. I do think for those who are not familiar, it's easy for me to forget that most people aren't familiar with Mexican or Mexican American culture or have had any interaction with it. I think it's it's a great introduction to that culture, if you will. I mean, if you don't mind, I thought we might, because we'll get back to the film towards the end, but just some questions. Take advantage of the fact that I've got you here, James. I mean, you come from a relatively famous family of actors, but why did you move to, what was the move about moving into producing and directing? I mean, I know that's been a while ago, but what led you in that direction?
Well, when I was at the Yale Drama School many years ago, and my brother was there he was one of my teachers, believe it or not.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and he would always ask me to, and he was also in the professional company there. And so he would have me come to the theater and watch him do his rehearsals, and then he'd say, "What do you think? What do you think?" And I started, and he said, "Well, you'd be a great director." And I said, "Well, I really like directing." He also was encouraging me to be an actor, so Stacy and I did several movies together as actors. But and then one time he was actually directing this little short film, and I went in and I was watching them edit, and I thought, man, this is so cool. This is so cool. Putting stories together in the cinema and the photography. And I think I was in my early 20, maybe not even 20. Yeah. And I always wanted to do it. And so there came a point where my friends that were executives, and I'd had a pretty good career as an actor. Yeah. And they said, you better get going with this directing thing if you're going to do it, because, time, you don't have so much. So at about 38 years old, I started directing, and I've done a lot of directing since.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we won't go through the filmography, but you've done a lot of, I guess, mostly it's narrative, but what has drawn you to documentaries? Because you've done a few of those.
Yeah, I did a documentary years ago for the Red Cross. That was the first one I did. And it was about vaccinating kids in Africa. They said, would you go over and do this? And it was quite an experience to see, be part of 1 million kids getting vaccinated for the measles, so that was an interesting experience. And then I made a movie, I produced a movie called Walk the Line, and it was about Johnny Cash. And that was the first musical film that I did. And right after that, my son Johnny was recording with a guy named Julian Raymond, who also did the score for Los Sensuales. And Johnny was 13 at the time. And Julian was working, he was at Warner Brothers, and he was working with Johnny on music. Johnny is a very talented kid. And Julian was producing Glen Campbell's records. And he said, James, would you do a show about Glen Campbell? I said, I don't think I want to do another narrative musical. We just did that. And he said, no, Glen's got Alzheimer's. And then I thought, I really don't want to do that. That sounds like that. I was scared to even say the word Alzheimer's. And then Julian said, just meet him, okay? And so Glen was brought over to the house with his wife Kim, and he was so funny. And he said, Kim said, James, Glen, talk to James about your Alzheimer's. And Glen goes, I don't got no Alzheimer's, I got part-timers. And then Glen says, when a man findeth a good woman, he findeth a good thing. I found me a good thing. He points at Kim. and I could just tell this guy he loved his wife and he was funny, and
Yeah.
so they said, it's only going to be a 5 weeks tour.
Yeah.
Turned out to be 171 shows, 2.5 years of filming, and that led me to, and that film was very successful.
Yeah.
And then that started me on making documentaries, and people started calling and saying, would you do this? Would you do that? And here we are.
And so that's how you got into music in particular, because it's like you said, you had Johnny Cash, Glen Campbell, now Linda Ronstadt. I think you're even executive producer on a David Crosby doc.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there something that about music particularly that has really caught your attention?
I think the storytelling, music is in and of itself, the storytelling in songs and in music is it's a great way to tell a story without just sitting there talking about it. And it's not actors, but I like making, because of my narrative background as a filmmaker, I like doing documentaries with character that are character driven.
Yeah.
And as opposed to archival documentaries and all documentaries about dead people. I like doing documentaries about living people, but so anyway, documentaries, you learn about yourself. That's the thing. When you get to talk to somebody, it's like your job too. I'm sure that when you interview people, you start learning about things in yourself that you didn't know, that you identify with that person, and it makes for an interesting conversation. And that's kind of what making a documentary is. Certainly in terms of the interview process, you learn things about them, and hopefully you're learning something about yourself, and you can inform the audience of things that you were curious about, and hopefully they were too, and they go away with something that they didn't have before they start watching it.
And I guess you learn that you have that knack for asking or being curious about things that other people are going to be curious about as well. Otherwise, you're making something that no one's going to end up watching. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm a very curious guy, and as somebody once said, in your choice lies your talent, so,
That's good. Do you think, I mean, this is, and you say you use your narrative background, people are calling this a golden age of documentaries. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think again, it's back to learning about other human beings' true experiences, and how they overcame their obstacles. Patty Chayefsky, a great writer, used to say, "Who is your hero? What does he or she want? And what's preventing them from getting it?" And that's a good formula for narrative films, and it's a great formula for documentaries. And even when you're making negative documentaries about people that are bad people, you still want to know who they are, and what did they want, and what was, they decided to murder somebody, and what was preventing them from getting it, that good cop. It's so, I mean, I think the formula works on all levels, but I think the golden age of documentaries is because there's so many, because of the internet, because of social media, because we know there's so many interactions with other people, and we realize that there's such a difference between the human experience. There's so many different human experiences that are different than ours that we're curious about, and until now that we have the ability to film, here we are talking, you're in Leeds and I'm in Culver City, and we're doing a Zoom call. We can now learn about each other in a way that we couldn't do it before, and those of us that are curious tune into those things.
And I think what's amazing, for all of us who might have thought, well, all the stories have been told, how increasingly we're discovering that actually we just haven't been paying very close attention, and there's so many stories that haven't been told. And I think this Linda Ronstadt one is an interesting one, and even to this day, as you said, how many people know that she's got these Mexican roots?
Right, exactly.
And that was right in front of our eyes. It was on TV. It's documented. I mean, she put the album out. Right. I mean, some of us. I mean, I remember that album. That was huge. I was still in South Texas, back in San Antonio, at least, and that was huge in the Mexican American community. But, you know, and I see this with, you know, and even the younger documentary filmmakers, they're looking, I mean, every week, I'm blessed, I will say, that I get to, part of my job is to watch great documentaries and talk to people about them. Because, you know,
I think social relevant films, you know, that's the young documentary people, that a lot of that is social consciousness,
yeah.
you know, and I think that's where a lot of the films are being made now, you know.
Yeah. So, well, Glen, what is your favorite Glen Campbell song?
Well, it's not a very famous one. It's "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress."
Oh, I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Jimmy Webb wrote it. It's just it was. I think it's special to me because when we were filming it, I would always shoot I was on the stage with Glenn, shooting close-ups, and whenever he would sing the song, it would just it would get me. I mean, I love all his classic songs, of course, but for some reason, that one emotionally, I think it was just the connection that he and I had when we were filming that, you know.
I mean, again, I actually haven't seen that doc. I'm definitely going to go find it and watch it because he's quite an interesting individual. He's not who a lot of people probably think he is, or was. Unfortunately,
Still like it. I mean, it won 3 Grammys, nominated for Academy Award. It's pretty good.
You think?
You think?
So what is for you? What's next in terms of projects?
Well, we're working on Glen Campbell, the narrative film, like Walk the Line.
Okay.
We're casting that now. I'm working on. I've been asked to do Greg Allman.
Really?
And, yes, and so we're working on that, and a band called Alabama. They've taught, you know, this is, yeah, and so there's some really cool stories out there about those guys, and I'm working on several narrative films, and this might sound, you know, I don't know if it'll be interesting to you, but it is to me. But doing a series on pain. On pain. Every kind of pain that you can imagine, you know, and the journey of that we all go through from the time we're born, coming out screaming, to the end. So it's adolescent pain, it's old age, it's the pain of opiates and dealing with it, it's emotional pain, it's PTSD, it's the journey that we all go through, but giving people that experiential thing of how people get through it, how they deal with it, and having compassion and empathy for those people suffering from it. So there's a whole science thing that I like to do too. So I just think that, you know, it's an interesting area.
And that's what's driving this. You just not that you currently are in a lot of pain. You just
no.
But no, that's very interesting because it's one of these. It's a topic people don't want to talk about, really.
Correct, but I think that people will be very interested to know about it.
Yeah.
If you do it in a way that is character driven, that is about people, you know. It's like if you look at Winston Churchill, let's say, and the pain that he was in, or Franklin Roosevelt and how he dealt with it, and you know, you can use normal people, regular everyday people, or sports heroes, or soldiers, or you know, it's a different kind of storytelling, but you know, it's another documentary area that, you know, it's a very specific subject. You know, it might not be it's not a music star, but it's certainly a big word. It's certainly a big subject, you know.
And given what you said earlier, you don't want to make films about dead people. I mean, are you going to have living people? Have you sketched it out already? Do you know how the series is going to?
We're working on it right now. I'm not going to talk to cadavers, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, well, they don't talk back.
No, they don't, and hopefully they're not in pain.
I think. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that. That sounds amazing. Well, I was just looking up the Allman Brothers the other day. I won't. You can't say, I'm sure, but trying to cast Glen Campbell, that's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you have someone in mind that you're talking to.
We have a few people in mind. Yeah.
Okay. And if we didn't, maybe it's hard to believe. I think we're coming kind of to the end of our time together. But let's bring it back to Linda and the Mockingbirds. What would be what is the lasting message you want people to take away from this film when they finally do see it?
I think the lasting message is to carry the message of the film, which is to, promote equality, to promote compassion, to promote empathy, and to celebrate the music and culture of others as well, and your own culture.
Yeah. Yes. And speaking of that, not my own culture necessarily, but in terms of Los Sensuales, how can we listen to more of their fantastic music? Is there any?
Go to their website, losensoles.com.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, you heard it here. I just want to thank you, James, for coming onto the podcast. It's been an honor to meet you and to talk about this great 60 minutes of a doc, I would say. And to remind our listeners, we've been talking with James Keach, director and producer of Linda and the Mockingbirds. Also want to give a shout out to This Is Distorted Studio in Leeds, England. Please remember to like us and share us with your friends and family wherever you happen to listen or watch podcasts. And this is Factual America, signing off.
You've been listening to Factual America. This podcast is produced by Alamo Pictures, specializing in documentaries, television, and shorts about the USA for international audiences. Head on down to the show notes for more information about today's episode, our guests, and the team behind the podcast. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Alamo Pictures. Be the first to hear about new productions, festivals showing our films, and to connect with our team. Our homepage is alamopictures.co.uk.